Welcome to the Catalyst Sessions for Monday. My name is Bill DeYoung, and once again, I'm really glad that you're here to be with us as we keep our arts community connected during these very, very weird times. Today, I'm thrilled to tell you that my guest is Florida Orchestra CEO Mark Cantrell. Hello, Mark.
Hey, Bill, how are you?
I'm doing fine. I'm doing fine. I understand it's your wedding anniversary today, so congratulations on that.
Thank you.
That's
Thank you.
well
29
done.
years. Yep.
That's fabulous, man. We got a lot to talk about today. Most specifically, of course, about what the 2021 season is kind of starting to look like in these shaky times. What's the great phrase you used recently with me, which is we're doing a jigsaw puzzle while water skiing?
That's exactly it. Yep.
Yeah, that there are so many factors in figuring out what you do. Obviously, the orchestra is not coming back full force in October the way you normally would. What does it look like now at this moment?
So right now, the biggest overwhelming factor that we're dealing with is safety. The safety of our patrons, the safety of our musicians, the safety of the staff, and of course the people who work in the halls. So we're putting together programs that will allow us to keep people distant on stage, keep people distance in the halls, and bring people great music. It's ironic that my previous job for 6 years was with the Wisconsin Chamber Orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
And we spent their entire life doing some of these smaller, lesser known pieces by very well known composers. So we're pulling a lot of these out and dusting them off for our patrons next year, as well as just some other stuff that people have not really heard. And then, of course, there is some great classical stuff that people know as well. So right now, we're looking at starting at the very end of October, beginning the first weekend in November, with Michael Francis conducting. And I'm not, what my PR people have told me, I'm not allowed to announce any pieces until September when it comes out. But that one will feature a composer of which we are all very happy anytime to go hear. It might start with a letter B and end with a letter N. That's as far as I can go on that. Or she'll
that guy. Yeah. I think that's the band Boston, isn't it? B-N.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's the More Than a Feeling TFO show. Hey, listen, so you're talking about, there's a lot of restructuring here. You're talking about fewer musicians on stage, maybe not the full complement of musicians. Maybe will you space them out?
Absolutely. There's been several studies that are done, and a lot more every day. There's more studies done on the aerosolization of the breath coming out of the instruments, and it's not necessarily logical to what the normal people would think. Me having played the bass trombone for a number of years can tell you that if I would stick a candle in my bell and play as loud as I could, the flame would barely flicker. But then yet other instruments like the flute and sometimes even string players who breathe a lot, we all breathe together when we play, whether you make noise with your breath like brass players and wind players do, or string players just
it's definitely a physical thing. I understand that. Yeah. Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. So it's not as much as you would think as the aerosolization, but we still want to be safe. So we're looking at all the environmental factors of the halls. We're looking at how many people can we safely get in. How do you get people in and out of the building is the other thing as well, because you don't want queues where people are lined up right next to each other. So these are all the things we're still working with the venues and trying to solve these problems as we go forward. But it will be different concerts. They're going to be shorter concerts, no intermissions, because that helps people stop from congregating. And then we'll have with the shorter concerts, people are in and out, but we're going to be doing more of them in a weekend. And we're actually moving to an A and a B program. So on some of the weekends, not all of them, for the first weekend when we start, for instance, you'll have an A program and a B program. So we may have a 2 o'clock, a 5 o'clock, and an 8 o'clock. And on Saturday, the Saturday is a 2 o'clock and an 8 o'clock. That's the A program. And then we have a B program at 5 o'clock. And then on Sunday, we'll have another program that way. So we're kind of the opera world does this like at the Met. They'll have multiple programs going at the same time. So we're looking at splitting the orchestra up and how we can do that. And of course, until we get more of a handle on this COVID thing, which time is our friend in this one, we know more about it. We're going to be doing some smaller pieces that don't involve, the big, 80, 90 piece orchestras that we used to be used to. And as we go by the year and we get more information and hopefully come up with a treatment or a vaccine, by the end of the season, we'd like to be back to more of the big orchestra pieces that people come to know us for.
Okay. Well, I mean, staying in the present though, You're talking, I'm sure, about spacing the audience out. So you're talking about smaller audiences.
Yeah.
I can see that somebody somewhere, you perhaps, you're crunching numbers. How can we make this work on different levels? That is, it's like doing a jigsaw puzzle or water skiing. I mean, that's like juggling a lot of eggs, isn't it? And it changes constantly, doesn't it?
It does. We're looking at probably only a third of the hall will be full with people when we come back to play, to keep people safe and to keep also just the logistics of getting people in. So instead of if we have a 2,000 seat hall, you can run the math on that. We're going to have, roughly 600, maybe 650, 700 people in the halls as we play, just because of keeping people safe and separate. And we're still with the box office looking at, how do we deal with seating? How do we deal with the sections? And again, just getting the people in and out of the building safely. And then all of the, the safety measures that we want to take, masks required, or what screenings are we doing? How do we make it touchless? All of that stuff, even
my
just
first thought was you could just put masks on all the string players. I mean, they don't, they don't blow anything. So.
And that's one of the things. However,
I'm sure they love that idea.
Actually, some of them do, some of them don't. That's one of the things we're working with the musicians. We have such a great group of musicians. They are actually real partners in this and helping us solve this. Me being a brass player, I'm not going to tell string player they have to wear a mask, because the mask comes down over your face. They actually hold the instrument between their chin and their shoulder.
Sure,
their hand doesn't do anything. It plays the notes. So is that going to interfere with what they're doing? So those are the kind of questions that we're asking. And what are the alternatives if we can?
Let me ask this question straight out. Why go to all this trouble? Why not just sort of say, okay, we're going to just, and a lot of organizations have done this, boom, blanketly cancel for the year. We'll see you in the spring or something. Why is it important that you don't do that? We
are here, regardless of COVID, for one thing. This is to make our community a better place to live. We are here to enhance this and make this the most fulfilling place for the citizens of our entire community as we can. If we fold up, we're not taking advantage, or we're not living up to what I feel our core purpose is. People at this time they're lonely, they're scared, they're frustrated. Live music can bring people together and help us heal, help us feel better, help with the mental health of people, help with the physical health of people of getting out, provided we can do it safely. So it is vitally important for us to be there to help our community. People always question, well, why do orchestras really exist? When we come back and you see people finally coming back to live concerts, you're going to see a change in people, a real transformation in people finally being together, brought together for something, to witness something beautiful. And it is vitally important that orchestras, however they can, play this role. You're right. Some orchestras have closed down at least until January, some longer.
Oh, yeah.
They're doing what they feel is in their best interest. And I've talked to many of the CEOs, my colleagues that do this, and they're making decisions based on their own circumstances. What they're doing in Nashville or Indianapolis doesn't apply to Florida. One of the great things about Florida, and this is why I'm so adamant about not throwing in the towel until we have no choice left, is that November up in Indianapolis, you're not going to play an outdoor concert. It's too cold. Up in Boston, you're not going to play an outdoor concert. We cram ourselves into concert halls too much, and we have such great weather down here in Florida starting in November.
Yeah.
So we're going to take advantage of every opportunity we can to be outside if that's the only place we can play and do it safely.
Well, I was rereading a lot of things today, and the very first interview that you and I did, you'd been on the job, I think, less than a month, and you were sort of, St. Petersburg, and you had been here with the Esplanade Orchestra, and one of the things that we talked about, and this has been a constant in my conversations with you and with Michael as well, is that classical music has this perception, and this is your phrase, as being dead white guy music for nearly dead white people. And that was part and parcel of your outreach kind of philosophy. Let's tell people that it's vibrant and is not just not a museum piece. That's the phrase you used.
Right.
So you're in the job for a year, you're going great guns. It was a great season last year. A year later, blammo, you're faced with this are we really necessary question, you know? And then you have to really double down and think, well, yeah, I think we are, you know, that classical music is so much more than, you know, dead white guy music for nearly dead white people. It's also a binding agent and a healer. And that's what you've been saying to me lately, that this is how we can help bring the community back together. But I mean, you're a year in the job and you're throwing like the biggest, I don't know what the baseball expression is, because I don't, you know, the biggest curveball, I guess. Like, oh God, what do I do now? There's a question here somewhere. When you said, yes, we must continue some way, somehow, and was there anyone, you know, did the board say, oh, this is the new guy, he's an idealist?
Oh, absolutely. We've had people all over the place, all over the map on that. But
Yeah.
if we stay the course, so this is actually where my years as an airline pilot actually come back. You know, when I was a captain flying the shuttle into LaGuardia, in and out of
Yeah.
LaGuardia, all those years of you know, when you're flying and the cockpit starts to light up with either yellow or red lights,
Yeah.
that's usually not a good thing. Red lights are worse than yellow lights, but none the same. You're still in the airplane. You still have to fly the airplane. There have been more perfectly good aircraft, not in the commercial world, but more perfectly good airplanes that have been flown into the ground because they had some little maintenance problem that was completely dealable with. But the pilots quit focusing on flying the airplane and focused on that one little problem. And then the next thing you know, there's a mountain right in front of you, and there's nothing you can do, and it's too late.
I see
So,
where you're going with this. Yeah.
yeah, fly the airplane. And until we have to make a decision, let's keep the thing going. Let's make decisions as we get information. Same thing in the airplane. There, you know, little light lights up, and it's like, okay, it's a master warning light, which is not a good thing that you want, as a red light. But what does that mean? Okay, you look out, your engine's on fire. So, well, what does that mean? Do you want to necessarily shut the engine down, you know, and put the fire out? Because once you do that, the engine's gone. You can't get it back. Or look ahead, oh, the airport's only 15 minutes up there. We can declare an emergency and go land there and be on the ground in 15 minutes. You got an hour before that engine on fire creates a problem for anything. So would you rather land the airplane with two engines and possibility something goes wrong and you have to do a go around and have two engines that are still operating at power? Or would you rather shut that down and take away, and then if you have to go around or do whatever, it's a big issue. Once you're landed, then you put the engine out and it's no big deal. So it's looking ahead and looking at and getting as much information to make good decisions as you can.
And
I know it's
don't
a
panic.
long-winded analogy. Yeah. And so we're flying the airplane. We will change and adapt to what we have to do. If it means we can't get to our destination the way we wanted to get there, we'll figure out another way to do it. I mean, I can tell you stories upon stories of where I had to, because of weather, had to divert, and people were like, oh, thank you. And I'm like, yeah, don't thank me. You got a 3-hour bus ride to get where you're going from here on out.
Right.
But we were there safely, and things happen. And that's what we're trying to do, is how do we keep this going? You know,
Yeah.
and if we have to do an emergency landing and we have to cancel concerts, then that's what we'll do. But why all of a sudden just close up and say, oh, we're not going to fly anymore, we're done, I can't do this, you know, what are we going to do? That does no one any good.
Well, I'm thinking of you know, a lot of mitigating factors, Mark. I mean, you've got an $11 million budget every year. You've got a lot of donors and you know, the people who back you, sponsors, who are watching you very carefully. What are you going to do? What did you tell me? I think it's 40% comes from ticket sales. Well, if you have no ticket sales, where's your money coming from? So you've got all those things to think about in addition to safety issues. And also, and correct me if I'm wrong, but another factor is we want people to know that we're still here. We didn't just, you know, oh yeah, we used to have an orchestra here, didn't we? That kind of thing.
You mentioned the donors. Okay.
Yeah.
We have great donors. We have great patrons. They made it possible for us for you and me to be sitting here having this conversation right now. So we also have an obligation to them to steward their gift. You know, I mean, we're a nonprofit, so we don't have stockholders, but I kind of look at our patrons and our donors as our stockholders. We have an obligation to them to do everything that we can to make sure that we ensure the health and welfare of this country. Of this company. We'll just keep it small. Yeah. So and if we just folded up and said, oh, sorry, you know, we can't do anything, see you later, maybe, that's incredibly offensive and insulting to them, that we didn't do everything that we could do to make their gift to us as valuable as possible. And given everything, we had, I think the final numbers were $450,000 worth of tickets donated back to the orchestra at the end of the year. That's enormous. And that shows the incredible generosity and support that this community has for us. So I'm going to take the shameless plug of saying to all of our donors, thank you very much, because we are here because of you.
That's
so
fine,
we
sure.
take that very, very seriously to do everything we can to safely bring them concerts. And I'm going to keep saying the word safely, because it would be easy just to say, well, we're going to do it and you guys figure it out. We do have the safety of our patrons and musicians and staff first and foremost in our mind. That's why this is so complicated. It'd be easy to just say, well, we're going back and you guys figure it out on your own. We're not going to do that. We're not going to put people in danger. But we are here. We have an obligation to them and our sponsors and everybody else to somehow do whatever we can to keep the message going and to keep this wonderful thing of music, where we bring people together for joy and happiness and beauty, which, seems in these days and age doesn't happen at all. And that's why it's so important for us to do everything we can to continue.
You have, as you pointed out, numerous examples in your life and career of meeting a challenge head on. You told me that I think you were with Esplanade in New York City right after 9/11, which must have been a really emotional time when people were sort of wondering, do we want to venture out and see concerts again? And the Boston Marathon bombing, you were with the Philharmonic then when that happened. So an atmosphere of fear and sadness and resignation was prevalent, and music helped, is my point.
It's a big healer. Music is a huge healer. The Boston Marathon bombings were a perfect example of that. We had the bombing on the Monday. We were supposed to play Beethoven 9 that Friday, so clearly we canceled the concerts or the rehearsals that we had scheduled on Monday. And then they had the big lockdown because they'd found the two brothers. Yeah. So the entire city, the entire state was shut down. And so, what do? We can either cry in our milk and woe is us, and this is so awful, or we can look for the opportunities in this. Now, unfortunately, I left right after that, just before we came back. They came back the following October with a huge Beethoven 9 celebration, great piece to do that with. The following fall that I had helped set up, and we did that, and it was a huge success for the orchestra and Ben Zander and everybody. It was a great time of healing for the organization, or for the city. So what we have to do when we have these situations like this is not whine and cry about it and say how unfair it is. It's horribly unfair. None of us like this. This is a terrible time. But what opportunities are in this for us to grow as human beings, to grow closer to each other, and to create something better for the future, rather than just say, oh, this is awful. And that's the way I've always looked at things. The same thing, and I give you analogies when I used to do the sled dog racing, long distance sled dog racing.
You're getting ahead of me. That's right where I was going.
Yeah. Nothing ever goes the way you want when you're doing that. And that's just nothing but 300 miles or 500 miles of figuring out, okay, how do I adapt to this that's just come out of this? And if you adapt, and you adapt well, then you, in a race situation, then if you do it better than anyone else, you win. For us, yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
I was going to say, can you put that on the timeline for me? When you were racing sled dogs on those marathon trips in Alaska, I'm assuming it was, or Canada?
Nope. It was all in the lower United States.
The lower United States?
Well, yeah, the lower 48. So Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, Minnesota,
For some reason, I thought you meant like south. Oh, Louisiana doesn't have sled dog races.
No.
So you're talking 300-400 mile runs, right? My voice is cracking. I'm getting so excited. Tell me some of the kinds of things that can go wrong when you're doing. I mean, I can only imagine. I've seen movies, right?
Oh yeah. Well, the weather, number one, is that, people always think when you see the movies, they think you stand on the back of the sled and, the dogs pull you over these pristine trails. No. The first long distance race I ever did, it was in the beginning of March, and the weather was, typical New England weather, cold. And then that Thursday and Friday, the race started Saturday morning, it rained. And it rained probably a half an inch of rain, somewhere in there. And then it got really, as typical, it got really cold. So everything turned to concrete and froze and turned into glare ice and all of that. So you know, you ever try going across a lake that has about a quarter, and then it started snowing on top of that. So you got about a quarter inch, half an inch of snow on top of glare ice.
I'm a
Yep.
Florida boy. I don't have a lot of experience with that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, yeah, you don't get if something that happens like that down here, something's gone horribly wrong in the world.
Right. We don't want that.
Yeah, and so you know you have no traction. And number two,
Yeah.
you got 12 dogs out in front of you. Okay, stopping is a thought. It's not a guarantee. You have this big break that digs down into the snow and slows them down, and they finally look back at you like, what's going on? And then they'll stop, and then you throw these two big hooks out. Well, when you're on glare ice, that break is nearly useless. It'll slow you down a little bit. So here I am going across this lake at night, and the dogs are going in the wrong direction for where the trail is, and I want them to go in a different direction. So I'm like, oh, criminally. So I finally get them stopped. And I'm like, okay, well, they're not going to stay stopped. I can't get off the sled to go do whatever. So we start going down again. And I finally take one of my big snow hooks, and there's cracks in the ice because ice is not, like a hockey rink, and just drag the thing along until it catches in one of the cracks and stops. And we come to a jerking stop. And then I can go up there and I changed leaders out and resorted it. Turns out, right after I did this and stopped, I look off to the right because one of the leaders kept wanting to go to the left. There was a big split of open water out in the middle of this lake. And she dogs probably smell it. And it's like, no, we don't want to get wet. We're not going that way. So, that's where I learned to listen to your dogs. They're smarter than you are in that situation. So we were around the split. Now that open water could have been 2 inches deep, or it could have gone all the way to the bottom of the lake 50 feet down. We have no idea. It could have been overflow or whatever. So so then we go around the crack and we get back up to the checkpoint. We can see the checkpoint at the end of the lake, and that's where we stop, and we're rested for 6 hours before continuing. But that's just the kind of stuff that's out there and happens.
Put that in a timeline sense briefly though for me. You took a break from playing music. This is just something you did.
This was I was playing the bass trombone with the Boston Pops Esplanade Orchestra, with the symphony, with the ballet, the opera. And in my copious amounts of free time, I trained and did sled dog racing. So, and I have never really had a TV in my life, in my adult life. So when you don't watch TV, and this was, a lot of this was before the internet, I don't do well sitting still. So this was something that I'd always loved to go winter camping. So I'm like, well, this is a great camping trip. I was never good at any sled dog racing. We had a lot of fun. I had a great team, but we were never going to win.
The truth comes out.
I was not even competitive. So it was just more fun.
What about becoming a pilot? Where is that on? This was before you went into like executive work? In
'97, the Boston Pops asked me to be one of the assistant personnel managers, so I did that. And I did that until 2005 when I quit playing trombone. And I quit the sled dogs I did in the 90s, and when my oldest daughter was born in 2000, I'm like, all right, I don't have the time for this. My dog truck, I drive 50,000 miles a year to go train the dogs in the truck. I mean, I was doing a lot of driving. And so I just said, I can't buy a new truck. My wife is going to divorce me if I'm gone all this time with kids and leaving her with them. So it's like, all right, the dogs are gone. Got to get a new hobby. And I'd always wanted
29 years, it worked out. Right.
She's still with me. I mean, she wants the Disney fast pass. When she dies and goes to heaven, they're like, oh, you were married to Mark, you come right to the front of the line. You don't have to wait with everyone else. So I always wanted to fly. And I also have this other hobby passion that I have of fishing. And there are all these wonderful lakes up in northern Maine that you can rent a float plane. And turns out there's only one place that's back then, I don't know if it's even still available, where you could actually rent a float plane and go fly into these places and fish them. So that's where I got the idea. I'll get my pilot's license, and then I can, go up to Twitchell's and rent an airplane and go in and fly in and do all this. But I'd always wanted to fly since I've been a little boy. So I did that. And then next thing, 2005 came along, and I'm like, I've played enough trombone. I'm kind of done with this. I want to move in a new direction. And so the airline pilot thing was there, and that was a really good time to get into it. So I finished up what training I need to get, got hired by a U.S. Air code share and U.S. Air United code share, and did that until probably would still be doing that if the Boston Philharmonic and Ben Zander hadn't said, hey, come back to us. We need somebody who understands the musicians and the union and can help us with our problems. Will you do that? And, with 2 young children, I said, yeah. And I was lucky flying the shuttle. I was home almost every night as a pilot. And then they sold the route and moved me down, and it was a disaster that I won't go into with that airline, which is no longer in business anymore. So it was a good thing. So that's the timeline.
You flew shuttles out of LaGuardia. I mean,
Yeah.
I can see, oh, I got my pilot's license. I'm going to, I'll take my family to the mountains or something. But I mean, you got a job as a
Yeah.
pilot, you know. You told
Fun.
me once that what it was with you, Mark, is that you have what's called the adventure gene.
Yeah.
And I probably asked you at that time, and I'll ask you again now, you just really wanted to come to Florida because of the fishing, right? Wasn't that kind of why you came down here?
It weighs in there. I'm not going to move someplace where there's not some kind of fishing. When I went to Wisconsin, you have muskie and smallmouth, one of the greatest fisheries in the world there. New England is fantastic because you have the saltwater and a bunch of other stuff up there. Freshwater type fishing. And Florida, this has been on my bucket list of things to do. So, but people are, oh, if you love fishing so much, why didn't you get a job or a guide or something like that? Believe me, there's several times in my life I thought about it,
Yeah.
but I like it. Like sled dog racing, it's not anything I'd ever want to do as a living. And there are people that make a living, doing the dog thing, but not, I like it and I enjoy doing it, but I don't want to do it for a living. And I don't want to take people and listen to them complain because they aren't catching fish, which when they're paying a guide to do that, that's what happens. So it's, but yeah, you're right. And for the orchestra thing, this is part of the adventure gene. This is part of, with this whole COVID thing, the reason why I'm not all morbid and sad about this, I mean, I am, for all the people that have been sick and died. I mean, that does weigh on me heavily, but this is a great opportunity for us to reinvent, our place in the world and how we do this and how we can impact people's lives. And that's what gets me going every day. I love the music. It's in my genes because since I've been a little kid, I've been listening to this stuff and playing with it, but it's more what we can do with that to change lives and to make it relevant today, as opposed to just being a museum. We've talked about that in the past too. I don't want to be a museum piece. We need to be relevant and really fitting into the people's lives of our community right here and now. And I've said this before and I believe it now. I think that Tampa Bay and St. Petersburg completely has the opportunity to become a cultural center of the world. All of the pieces are here. And there's so much going on and this place is growing like crazy. And what more exciting thing to be than to be a part of that and maybe somehow be one of the catalysts that move this forward and turn, we look back in a few years and say everybody in the world wants to come to St. Pete for culture or Tampa Bay. Because
it's an exciting time to live here. I would agree with that.
It is. It is.
I mean, except for the COVID thing, but
yeah.
So we're gonna announce the season, such as it is, in early September. Is there a launch date, or are we just saying early September?
Should be right after Labor Day.
Okay.
Should be right after Labor Day. We'll announce, and we'll have all the details of what we're doing in November and December, and then and some highlights of the rest of the year, and then how we're working it with tickets, how we're working with these A and B programs, and then the safety protocols that we're looking at, and of course, I'll give the big caveat: all subject to change based on everything that we're doing.
Of course.
And if we can't get in the halls, then we'll look at outdoor venues. And if we can't get in outdoor venues, then we'll look at streaming. And if the government comes in and says no groups of anybody can get together, then we'll figure that out as we go as well. So we've got several layers of plans that we're doing where we don't just roll up and say, oh, well, we hit an obstacle, we can't do it. We'll find another way to do it.
Well, I am looking forward to checking in with you and with Michael too, as we announce that. Maybe we can get the two of you on here together on announcement day. And
that would be
you don't have to be in the same room, you don't.
I got to tell you, this technology thing, if one of the positives about this is people have now been forced to learn how to use this. And it actually can be an incredibly powerful tool if used properly. It can also be an incredibly useless thing if you don't use it right. But
we've done them both here at the Catalyst, believe me. the early editions of the Catalyst sessions. I told you we're about to hit show 100, but a couple of the early ones were pretty bumpy technically.
That's how we learn. It's like I always tell people when I would teach my students playing trombone. They'd be like, oh, I can't do this. And I'm like, of course you can't do this. The only way you figure out how to do it is by going in a practice room and making some mistakes and learning from it and growing. That's the only way we grow, is by pushing ourselves. That's what the orchestra is doing. Are we going to handle this whole COVID thing perfectly? Have we handled it perfectly? Absolutely not. But what we're doing is we're not doing anything that's critical, and we're learning from it, and we're trying to grow as to how we become a better organization and better people because of it.
We're all going to come out on the other side. I think it's going to be great. Whenever the hell that is. Hello. Hey, Mark, great talking to you.
You as well, Bill. Anytime. And
we'll see in a couple of weeks when it's announcement time, and hopefully it'll be even better than what you've told us.
Oh, it's going to be fantastic. I was told I could only give you so much, and it'd be great to get Michael on here because and let him talk about the pieces. But it's a good time. I think we've got a scary but bright future ahead of us.
Mark Cantrell, thank you so much. We'll see you soon, my friend.
Thanks, Bill. Be safe.